Ladies and gentlemen, our event is about to begin. Aaron Goldberg, go ahead.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event today, where we're going to talk about how to meet the unique challenges of protecting cloud assets. Critically, a topic that we are looking at as every one of us as an IT person or involved in the IT area, and the impact of cybersecurity and protecting assets is not just our problem, but it's an organizational issue given the penalties and fines for breaches and other events where we lose information. Privileged account security is absolutely a key part of cybersecurity, and we're going to talk about that today. And it's especially important in the cloud as it presents a different set of threats than many on-premise or in-house data centers do. It's right now, frankly, a important part of your security infrastructure for enterprise accounts. So we get a great chance to really look at this issue and learn a lot more about it. And I want to thank our sponsor today, CyberArk, because without their support, we don't get a chance to bring you this event. And speaking of our event, we have two outstanding people on the line today. Our primary speaker is going to be Chris Smith. He's in product marketing at CyberArk. But we also have a more technical person who's a CISSP, and that's Brian Murphy, and he's with us, and he's going to be available during our Q&A. The good news here is that if you have a more technical question, a highly detailed question, Chris is going to help us. Brian is going to help us get that information to you. So we'll answer those questions during our live Q&A. So don't be afraid to ask any question you need, and in as much detail as you'd like to give us. Now, just a couple things for those of you in our audience. First, one of the most important things you can do is download a copy of today's slides. I think it's a best practice, and there are three reasons why. First, it's a great place to take notes. Second, it's something you can share with peers in your organization so they get benefit from this event. And third, it's a persistent reminder of this event. Also in your downloads area, where the PDF of the slides, there are two other assets. One is a case study that I think is very informative. And another asset focuses on how the CyberArk solution works with Amazon Web Services. We have two, as I said, outstanding speakers today, and they bring a real combination of that I think is very valuable for you in our audience, and that's deep technical knowledge, but also, more importantly, real-world experience, which really helps us get more understanding and get a good sense of how this works in the real world. So with that, I'm going to get out of the way and turn it over to Chris Smith, and we can get started. So Chris, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone being on the call as well. So my name again is Chris Smith, and I'm the product marketing manager here at CyberArk, responsible for our cloud solutions. And today what I want to do is share with you some of the key responsibilities and the unique challenges to consider so that you can protect cloud assets. And if we can move to the next slide. So in terms of agenda, what I wanted to do today was really briefly sort of introduce cloud and cover the cloud basics, talk about the expanded attack surface, because that really has changed from a cloud perspective, talk about the importance of securing the management console, and then also talk about sort of the unique requirements of cloud and really how to address them. And one of the key points here is, and we'll get into this in a few moments, is really about the shared responsibility of securing the infrastructure as a service elements of your cloud strategy. We want to look at some of the best practices and customer use cases, and then also look at some other learnings as well. And obviously, at the end, we want to leave time for questions. So, and as Aaron pointed out, this is a very exciting area. We've got we have a lot of interest from customers. We've learned a lot over the past few months and past few years in terms of what customers are doing in the cloud, how they're deploying, and some of the challenges that they're facing. So it should make, hopefully, for a very interesting session. And I'd be happy to answer questions, as would Brian, either directly. You can email us, or you can reach out to us afterwards, whatever makes sense for you. So I'll just take one slide just to very briefly talk to you a little bit about CyberArk. So first, just a very quick introduction in case you don't know us. So we're a trusted expert in the privileged account security space. We focus our innovation and security expertise solely on privileged accounts. And you'll see in a little bit about why that's so relevant to the cloud space. And we've got a very large base of loyal customers and partners with over 3,000 customers, including almost half the Fortune 500. And, to be upfront, we've basically seen more and really done more with privileged accounts than any other vendor out there, both in the cloud and also on premises. And we've got over 12 years of innovation built into our solution, and we've got a lot of industry firsts in terms of being first to market in various areas. So we provide enterprise class products. We've got scale to provide the support and services to our customers around the globe. And we're a financially strong organization with double-digit growth. We're profitable, and we're a public company with a very loyal team of professionals and support folks, really focused on ensuring that our customers are secure and that their environments are secure. So that's the quick intro to CyberArk. There's lots more information on our website, but just wanted to briefly cover that. Then we'll get into what we're covering today. So a lot of organizations are thinking about cloud, and maybe you're thinking your organization isn't maybe quite ready yet to fully embrace cloud. And I'm not here today really to convince you whether you should go to cloud or not. But what I can tell you is that we're seeing a really big uptick in interest in the cloud and much more awareness with security and IT leaders around the need to, and this is really important, to get ahead and be proactive in ensuring the security of the cloud and also the DevOps initiatives that are taking place inside your organization. So that's really important. A lot of what we'll talk about today is really about getting ahead of those security issues that can take place. Now, there can be a lot of acronyms and buzzwords, and some are very specific to the public cloud vendors. I'll try and minimize those buzzwords. And really, regardless of your experience with cloud, our goal today is to bring some clarity and to help you gain awareness of the security implications. Now, I realize I speak a little fast, but we're going to try and cover a lot of ground today in the webinar and move at a fairly good pace. And as I say, I'm happy to talk one-on-one or put you in touch with one of my colleagues. We're always interested in learning more about the specific needs of customers and their challenges in the cloud, because it's through learning about the issues you're facing that we get stronger ourselves. So today we'll definitely look at how the attack surface has changed and how to lock down access, how to secure the internal plumbing of the cloud environment, and how to meet the and consistently enforce security policies across the entire organization. And that's part of the work we'll do around focusing on the best practices for securing the cloud-based assets. Now, we're just going to very briefly cover software as a service, or SaaS. And basically for SaaS, we secure the admin consoles for commercial apps, such as a Salesforce or an Office 365. We'll cover that, but we'll cover that pretty briefly. Most of the time, we're going to focus on infrastructure as a service. And the SaaS stuff we'll cover, and we'll show you how to do it. It's relatively easy. And most importantly, one of the things we'll do is we're going to share our experience and learning from working with our customers in the US, the Americas, Europe, Asia Pacific, and around the globe in terms of what they're doing in their cloud environments. Now, what I'd like to do, if folks don't mind, is we just want to do a quick poll question just to understand where folks are today in terms of securing their cloud assets. So, Aaron,
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. We have a very simple poll question. If your organization is running your own applications on the public cloud, whether it's Amazon, Microsoft Azure, any other solution, how are you securing them? Are you most relying on public cloud vendors' built-in security? Are you using a mix of third-party products and the public cloud vendors? Are you investigating, planning, or developing a strategy to protect the cloud? Does it vary based on the specific workload, application, or business unit? Or you're not sure? If you could answer our questions, that'd be great. What we're going to do is we're going to get to this poll result a little later on today, so know that we will get back to these results. And again, I do want to remind our audience that we've got tremendous resources to answer your specific questions. Some have already come in. I want to thank Scott. I'd like to thank Charles. I'd like to thank Karen for their questions. But again, don't forget to add them in. You can do that at any time. So, Chris, I'm going to move it forward, and we'll get back to your presentation.
Great, thanks. Actually, I'm going to just jump backwards. I missed out a slide, so let me just do that. So I want to just cover the SaaS environment here, so just very briefly. So I want to just quickly cover the basics of SaaS. So this is securing things like Salesforce, Office 365, and so on and so forth. Now, these are the applications that typically provide access to corporate data for employees inside an organization. And for these, you'll want to monitor them, track them, and control which administrators can provide access and so on and so forth. And there's quite a few challenges here with securing these accounts. So first of all, they're not used by the traditional IT folks. Instead, they're used by Salesforce admins or admins in HR. So what happens is passwords are often shared, they're left unchanged, and they can also be written down fairly frequently. So the challenge here is this can result in a proliferation of users with access to credentials, You can have undetected access to data that continue for long periods, like you don't necessarily know who's actually accessing the data. And it's really difficult often to track down and account for sort of legitimate use of these accounts. So, something like Salesforce, you can essentially, if you've got a rogue user of that, they've got access to your entire customer database potentially. So, again, very, very damaging information. So here the vulnerability really is primarily the corporate data. And obviously if it's a Twitter account or social media, and we've seen some hacks there recently, then it's the brand image that can suffer if someone gets hold of those media accounts. So there's certainly, while there's less potential for lateral moves, the data can be very valuable. But look, the good news here is that securing these SaaS accounts can be relatively easy, and you can do it with the privileged account management solution. And if you do that, it really secures the password and credentials in the digital vault, tracks and monitors the specific individuals using the credentials, as well as, if necessary, you can detect anomalies, you can monitor, and you can even shut down specific sessions. So the quick point here for this slide is really to say that it's pretty easy with a privileged account security solution to secure those SaaS accounts. For this, that's all I want to do in terms of covering SaaS for this session. The rest of the session will focus on infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So before we do that, though, let's take a quick look at the attack surface and see if it really is different from an on-premises environment. So if we step back a little bit, the cloud can be something of a different beast, and it can be viewed differently both inside the organization. Sometimes what we see is less awareness of the security challenges and less clarity often on who is actually responsible for security inside the organization of the cloud and so on. And sometimes the operational processes around cloud have been set up sort of really opportunistically, maybe outside of the corporate security policies. And I think a key thing to remember here is you don't need IT to get a cloud app up and running. Basically anyone on this call can open up an account on Amazon AWS with their credit card. So it's really easy to set it up. And of course, that's a problem. So the risks and exposure here can be quite different as well. And we've seen some examples. At last summer's US Black Hat conference, there was a paper presented on account jumping in the AWS environment. And here they were able to, by account jumping, they were able to go from essentially the cloud environment actually laterally into the corporate sort of on-premises data center. So there was a DDoS attack that resulted in access to an EC2, that's the compute control panel in the Amazon, so to speak, of the hosting service code space. Now the attacker here was able to wipe out much of the company's customer data, and essentially because they're a hosting service, it basically put the company out of business. So again, something potentially very serious. Now hackers have also set up bots to scan code repositories like GitHub to find inadvertently placed AWS S3 keys. Now S3 is a storage, AWS's simple storage service, and the S3 keys are basically the storage credentials. So the attackers were going after them, and then once they got hold of them, they basically used those keys and the S3 API to spin up the maximum number of EC2 servers, so compute servers, and that allowed the attackers to use essentially compute resources that someone else was paying for to mine bitcoins. So in this case, the victim gets a big bill for the AWS compute resources. Now obviously there's lots of other things that could go on there as well, but they're just a few examples. And I mean, just one point about AWS. These examples happen to be about AWS. That's primarily because they're the biggest and they're really the leading public cloud vendor. So, there's other examples for other public cloud vendors as well. And overall, their security is very, very good. And we work with, security architects at AWS and others, and they clearly take security very, very seriously and are very, very knowledgeable. So within CyberArk, we have a red team basically to test some of the assumptions that we make and really challenge our thinking. And it's really part of our corporate culture to look at the risk and really try to understand what needs to be secured and where the vulnerabilities are. So in putting together, this presentation, I spent a lot of time talking to our red team, and they were, pretty agnostic as to whether the infrastructure is cloud or on-premises. And really, they said the key path was to basically get access to the management console. And then they use the API keys and credentials to access servers and data and so on and so forth. And it doesn't really matter in many respects whether they're in the cloud or not. So our red team really just sees the cloud as just like an on-premise opportunity, providing lots of opportunities for attackers. So there's many similarities with the management console here. So while the management console in a standard computer environment are very different for cloud, there's also sort of many similarities. So the public cloud management console provides opportunities for attackers just like the on-premises admin consoles. However, the key difference here is that the cloud management console is potentially more powerful. It provides more access to more resources. So it really enables attackers to copy and manipulate data, install ransomware, and even install their own applications to gain access to your corporate resources. So, a lot of similarities here, but also some key differences. And what I'll do next is talk a little bit about our red team and how they, they gain access to confidential data at a large financial services institution. So here's sort of the attack path. So the first step was that the red team did some phishing and was essentially able to compromise an IT laptop. So the standard sort of phishing attack, and again, they can be pretty sophisticated in terms of what they do, but nevertheless, it's phishing that gets them in there. So here, once they got onto that laptop, they explored and they found a local API that was used to provision the AWS infrastructure on this laptop. And then using the stolen API key, the red team was able to basically access the institution's AWS environment. And then from there, they were able to clone servers, and they attached their own S3 storage buckets to the attackers' servers. So here, very successful. Basically, the red team gained access to the customer's database, including sensitive, personally identifiable information. So very, very serious. So a key takeaway here is that cloud is open to many of the same approaches and vulnerabilities that you address in on-premises environments to protect and secure your privileged accounts. So I think, again, this is just quite a powerful example of, in many respects, not necessarily how easy it was, but how traditional it was in many respects to get into that cloud environment. And, that's certainly recognized by the analysts. And as we noted, by Gartner, I mean, these privileged accounts in the clouds have very powerful new capabilities, and really protecting the cloud requires the privileged accounts to be secured, controlled, and continuously monitored. Now, we don't have time to cover today, but there are many tools available to detect vulnerabilities. And for example, we recently announced the integration of our discovery and audit tool, CyberArk DNA, with the Amazon Inspector tool. And this brings a view of privileged accounts together with the anomalies such as missing patches in the AWS compute infrastructure. And that can really help IT prioritize which vulnerabilities they should be addressing. And you can actually download that tool for free if you're interested from our website. So what I wanted to do here was just really sort of set the context for for the discussion really around infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. So first, what I want to do is really talk about the management console for the public cloud. Now, this is the same management console that was hacked by the red team example that we just reviewed. And what I'd like to do now is just, if we can jump into the survey results, let's just have a look at those.
Sure. Actually, it's pretty interesting, Chris, I have to say, because there's not any single option that really jumps out. Most people are using a mix of third-party and the public cloud vendors' security solutions. Not surprising. 25% probably are not using the cloud, so we can change these numbers a little bit. But I think what's interesting here is just the lack of consistency. Is that similar to what you're finding out there in the real world?
No, that's a great point. So I think what's interesting here is that the folks most likely to rely on the public cloud vendors' sort of built-in security will see that the cloud vendors actually view security as a shared responsibility. So yes, this is pretty typical of what we're seeing, a fairly broad mix. And a lot of folks obviously looking to use some sort of mixed solution or also investigating what needs to be done. So so I want to just thank folks for responding to the poll, and we'll jump back to the presentation if that's okay. So thank you.
Sounds like a plan.
So let's talk a little bit about sort of securing the console, because that's really one of the basics. If you're using a public cloud vendor such as AWS or Azure, you'll access your entire cloud infrastructure through the cloud vendor's management console. Now, this management console is incredibly powerful, and it really does hold the keys to the cloud kingdom, and it's even more so than for the on-premises admin consoles. So this management console really lets you set up and configure the entire cloud infrastructure, so allocating resources, setting up applications, assigning compute instances, determining which regions and which zones the application run in. You also set up security parameters, you delegate authority, and you can enable others to have access. And then also billing and purchasing of applications to the marketplace takes place here. So there really are a lot of things that can be done from the AWS Management Console. And this is both accessed through human users and also through scripts as well. So really a first basic step in securing your cloud assets is to make sure you lock down, control, and monitor the management console to secure the cloud, and then secure those associated credentials in the digital vault. Now, with the digital vault infrastructure, you can secure, rotate, and control access to the privileged passwords used to authenticate to the management console. So I'll just very briefly, in case you're not familiar with a secure digital vault, so this basically, so for here, the access credentials to the management console will be secured in the digital vault and then rotated according to policy. Now, each administrator authenticates to the digital vault using their own unique credentials, and then the vault only provides access to the accounts the specific administrator is allowed to access, and it's all based on the principles of least privilege. So you also may only give someone access for a specific time period or to complete a specific task. And again, all the access is tracked and monitored, even recorded if required, and prioritized on the level of trust or for an audit usage and so on and so forth. And a single vault can store the entire enterprise's privileged credentials, really enabling policies to be consistently enforced. And this also can give you a very holistic view of how a specific privileged account is used, or in this case, how a specific management console is used, and what the specific administrator's responsibilities and activities are. And here, it's important to note that credentials can be secured for both humans and non-humans, so scripts, basically, or APIs. And this is important as the management console functionality can be driven by scripts and often is. So that's just a quick overview. There's a lot more on privileged accounts. Obviously, we want to focus on cloud here, but just wanted to give you the basics on privileged accounts, and we can certainly get into more of that in the Q&A. So now that we've got the management console secured, let's look at some of the cloud's unique requirements and how we can address them. So the cloud vendors, AWS and Azure, and the other folks as well, they do a lot to ensure the security of the cloud infrastructure, including the compute, the storage, the networking resources, as well as the physical infrastructure. Now, but, and this is a very important but, as each of the public cloud vendors point out, security in the cloud is a shared responsibility. So you as the application owner are responsible for protecting your applications, the OS, the infrastructure, and other assets running in the cloud. So really everything above the hypervisor or equivalent layer is your responsibility or the responsibility of the enterprise customer. And additionally, you may even need to configure some of the services provided by the cloud vendor. For example, basic perimeter security is included with the cloud vendor's infrastructure offering, but it is configured by the customer. So lots of responsibility here for the customer. And this is where it's really important to not think in terms of, oh, I'm on AWS or I'm on Azure, they're going to take care of security. Because in fact, they're essentially saying, we'll protect the security of the cloud, but you need to protect the security of whatever it is running in the cloud, and obviously the management console as well. So just like on-premise, you'll also need to secure the credentials that applications need to access customer data and to interact with other applications and assets. So, if you're not familiar with app-to-app credentials, what do we mean by that? Well, apps need credentials, and they need those credentials to access resources. And the application credentials are all too often hard-coded, and this can be a very troubling vulnerability. So app credentials and the access keys exist everywhere. They're in applications, scripts, databases, servers, network devices, and there's often a large number of them throughout the cloud and IT environment. Now, hard coding and embedding the credentials in the code or the script makes it very easy to use. But this represents a really significant vulnerability because attackers or malicious insiders can easily get access to these credentials. Even worse, sometimes these credentials are in clear text. The bottom line is when the credentials are hard-coded or locally stored, they're nearly impossible to rotate. And further, by making them static, they become an easy target for attackers. Now, they can also be very inadvertently stored in the code repositories such as GitHub and other sort of development platforms. And again, there's several published examples of that where folks have essentially picked up credentials from those code repositories. So when our applications and credentials are hard-coded and embedded in the code and script, it's really difficult to track who's using them, who has access to them, how they're being used. And with no central management, there's really no way to track or assign accountability to the application's credential use. And unfortunately, because the application credentials provide access to mission-critical systems, attackers tend to pursue them. So that can be a big problem. So obviously, to minimize risk, you'll follow best practices and you'll avoid hard-coding passwords. And instead, you'll secure the credentials in the vault and then rotate them according to policy. And just like with human users, you can then assign each app, code image, or script unique access credentials, and then track, monitor, and control them using the digital vault. Now, this way you'll know which apps are accessing resources such as your customer database, and when an app is retired, you can simply turn off the credentials. Because, again, in the hard-coded environment, most people don't want to take the risk of turning off credentials because they don't really know who's accessing that particular application and which credentials are being used. So it is clearly a best practice to secure application to application and script credentials in a secure digital vault, and then monitor, track, control, and rotate, and do those all according to the organization's security policies. So very, very important. Now, a core business benefit of cloud is elasticity. And what this means is it's the ability to easily and instantaneously scale up and scale down the number of compute instances or virtual servers. And this is really a core principle of cloud and maybe one of the most attractive features of cloud. It basically enables on-demand computing. So it means that as an enterprise, you only pay for what you use, and you can also assign resources on the fly. Now in cloud, this is done automatically with the various automation tools. No humans are required. So each public cloud environment has got some sort of built-in capability, such as with AWS, it's autoscale or AWS autoscale. And then also as part of the orchestration and automation tools with DevOps, such as Puppet, Chef, Ansible, and even containers like Docker, they also facilitate on-demand services. And then just as a side note, these DevOps tools are also used for on-premises environments as well, but they are becoming increasingly widely used in cloud environments. So the ability to rapidly sort of scale up or scale down, that offers some new challenges and potential risks. So when a new application instance is actually created and launched, they need privileges and they need credentials to access resources. So the automation tools can provide the credentials, but the question is, how are they secured? So to be secure, the requirements are for elastic compute is that when a new application instance is created, and as you dynamically scale, you want to immediately secure the permissions and credentials in the secure digital vault. And this can be achieved with integration between the automation tools and the secure digital vault. And this is an example of some of the work that CyberArk's done in the past, for example. So as you look at your cloud environments, one other sort of important consideration is DevOps. Now, the DevOps pipeline is a development to operations process designed to reduce time to deployment. Now, it uses a continuous integration and continuous delivery process, and it's becoming more widely used in an on-premises and cloud environments, and it may well be part of your cloud environment. Now, DevOps is a big topic on its own, and we don't have time to cover it now. And again, I'm just giving you a sort of a high-level view here. But if it's part of your development environment, it's important to consider as there are privileged accounts throughout the DevOps pipeline. And you'll need to, you'll need to secure and protect the credentials and permissions used by the DevOps tools and the management consoles associated with the DevOps tools. And as well, you'll need to secure the credentials and permissions used in the scripts and application instances. Now, one of the security challenges here is that the DevOps environments tend to be run by developers. And developers can be, and I'm going to speak now as a former developer, more focused on getting their apps deployed and operational than necessarily security considerations. So what can happen is a quick fix to some of these vulnerabilities can go unnoticed until you get the application operational and scaled up. And then when the app becomes a corporate app, then the workaround or quick fix may not be as secure, and it often doesn't also fit policy. So if you're developing your cloud strategy, it's really important that you start to consider DevOps sort of as part of that strategy. So as you develop your plans to secure your cloud environment, make sure they include DevOps. And that's certainly something that we've heard from our customers and clients working in this space. So the other interesting thing is that, and another important consideration is that a significant number of organizations don't just use one cloud provider, but for various reasons they use multiple cloud providers. So business flexibility, cost, avoiding dependence on a single vendor. Sometimes it's different business lines, there's been acquisitions, different geographies, for example, Europe versus North America or South America. So Gartner actually recently published a survey results which showed that only 15%, that's 15% of organizations actually use a single cloud provider. Some 60% use between 2 and 5 cloud providers. So the takeaway here is that when you develop your security plans for your cloud environment, you should assume that you'll be securing multiple cloud environments. That, again, is an important consideration. So, we're also seeing, multiple cloud environments with our customers that are either fully embracing the cloud or migrating to the cloud, and they're using a mix of public or private cloud, on-premise or hybrid, as well as DevOps environments. Now, the sum of all these environments presents a bit of a challenge, and it's a dynamic challenge as the cloud adoption is increasing. So today, for example, we're working with several large enterprises that are making major strategic commitments to the cloud, either for late 2017 or 2018. And what we're finding is that CISOs and IT leaders want, as a best practice, to be able to enforce the same security policies across the entire enterprise, regardless of the computing environment. And to achieve this, typically enterprises want to be able to manage the user credentials and access permissions with a single solution. So this is really important, as in many cases, the same IT administrators are accessing and managing multiple compute environments and also development environments as well. Similarly, for non-humans, both cloud and on-premises applications may be using APIs to access, for example, a customer database. So the takeaway here is that you can enforce consistent security policies regardless of the compute or development environment across the entire enterprise when you use a shared secure privilege management solution. And we'll jump into a few case examples later where we show you how that works. But before we take a look at those case examples, I want to just quickly sort of recap some of the challenges we've seen in identifying and securing the cloud. The first one was really establishing sort of enterprise-wide security policies. We looked at how securing the cloud vendor's management console is very important. We talked about how enabling your applications and other assets to access resources is key. We talked about assigning and securing credentials in an elastic compute or on-demand environment. We also talked about the DevOps pipeline, and that's essentially widely used now because it enables you to reduce time from development or writing new code to making it operational. And obviously, at the same time, it can introduce some new vulnerabilities. Then lastly, we also talked about multiple cloud environments. So I realize I might be a bit biased here, and my apologies, but each of these security challenges really does have implications for both human and non-human privileged accounts. And most importantly, securing the credentials and permissions associated with the privileged accounts is really an essential part of securing your cloud environment. So that goes back to that Gartner data that we looked at a little bit ago, where Gartner again is saying really the privilege can be the key to securing your assets in the cloud kingdom. So that's like the overview in terms of sort of what we've seen. What I want to do next is just jump into how some of our customers are securing their cloud environments in the real world. And just before we do that, just want to briefly cover a couple of example deployment architectures. So first, just take a quick look on these 3 different deployment architectures. So the first is running privileged account security on premises, and this is to secure apps running in the cloud. Now, the second one we've got is an all-in cloud environment, and we've got increasing numbers of customers doing this, where they're basically running privileged account security platform in the cloud to secure apps also running in the cloud. so all in on the cloud. We're also finding a lot of customers have got sort of hybrid environments where they're either running the CyberArk or the Secure Digital Vault either on the cloud or on premises, but they're securing both cloud-based assets and also on-premise-based assets. So here the key is that they're using the same privilege management platform to secure apps running both cloud and on-premises assets. So again, that's quite a common situation that we're seeing. So next, what I want to do is share 3 representative customer examples. So there's a mid-sized European. Sorry, I'm not seeing the slide here. Hopefully that's up.
Your slide is up, Chris.
Okay, great. So next, what I want to do is share 3 representative customer examples. So there's a mid-sized European wealth management company that's basically shut its data center and migrated all essentially its entire IT function to a cloud-based infrastructure. The second is where a business wanted to have on-demand computing and a very high-level, scalable sort of big data and analytics platform. And the third is a large global enterprise with legacy environments, public and private cloud, and DevOps tools. And they were working also across multiple geographic and regulatory environments. The key here is that they required consistent enforcement of security policies across the entire organization. So those are 3 of the examples we'll look at. So let's jump in and look at those now. So this first one is a full public cloud deployment to the mid-sized wealth management company. So here the objective was to simplify the infrastructure and reduce costs, and also to comply with some fairly rigorous security and regulatory needs. And the approach here was to move the entire infrastructure and all their applications to a single public cloud. So they actually took this in multiple stages as they migrated from essentially initially an on-premise environment and now entirely running in the cloud. And they actually now run their privileged account security solution in the cloud. And this includes managing the privileges for the cloud admin console in the cloud as well. So using a high availability disaster recovery to ensure that it's a very robust solution that can undergo a number of different outages but still be up and running. So the result was that they very successfully migrated all their apps to the cloud and the entire compute environment to the cloud. And they secure all the privileges and credentials in a single solution. And this is fully deployed and operational, and the company's been very, very successful doing that. And again, this is a good-sized organization in the financial services space. So again, they face some fairly significant regulatory challenges to make sure that they met those things as well. And we've got a similar example of a customer doing this and there's the published case study that you'll get access to covers a similar example in South America with FS in a different industry vertical. So the second example here is an example of big data and analytics running on AWS. So here the objective was to be able to analyze market and customer data on demand at scale with minimal investment in infrastructure, while also meeting security and regulatory needs. So here, the solution approach was to leverage the AWS cloud and also the built-in functions of the AWS cloud. And what they did here was to integrate the Secure Digital Vault with the AWS Autoscale so that they could dynamically secure the credentials in the vault as each application instance and its credentials were created by the AWS Autoscale capability. So this is a really nice integration between AWS Autoscale and the CyberArk Digital Vault in the way that an application is created and the instance it's created or the instance of it is created, those credentials are locked up in the Digital Vault. So the result of this was it meets the on-demand needs of the business for enabling to do very complex analysis on large data sets very quickly, and it fully secures the sensitive data and the cloud environment. And then most importantly, for the customer standpoint, not only is it secure, but they'll also only bill for the compute resources when they're actually used. So this was, again, a very cost-effective way of doing some very heavy-duty analytics sort of on demand when it was needed. Then this third example is a global enterprise with both a hybrid environment of mixed cloud environments and on-premises environments and DevOps. And the objective here is that they wanted to have the flexibility to really use any compute environment based on the geography or the customer need. And by customer need, I mean the business need within the particular business area what the demand was like, and they also wanted to very quickly deploy applications at scale. So the solution architecture here was to leverage the cloud and also DevOps and automation tools to maximize deployment flexibility. And they basically here integrated the Vault with the DevOps tools so they can automatically secure the credentials and the permissions. And they do that by using a single privileged Vault solution. And the key here is this enables the CISO and the IT leaders to manage policies across the entire enterprise consistently. So the result is that they can deploy apps on the public, private cloud, or on-premises locations based on business needs. They can immediately secure those credentials in the Vault when the app instance is created, and they can, most importantly, and again, these folks are in the financial services space, they can consistently enforce security policies regardless of the compute environment, regardless of where the solution was developed, and also regardless of the geographic environment. So these are really three great examples of customer cloud initiatives. And one of the great things about our platform is its flexibility and really its ability to take on different challenges. So that's a quick summary of some case examples. What I'll do next is just cover a quick summary of some of the best practices that we've seen. So the cloud is still evolving, and really so are the best practices. They're still evolving as well. And as we work with our customers to secure the cloud environments, these are some of the best practices that we're experiencing. So I'll just run through this list. And again, I think the folks have found this very useful in terms of as we go out and deploy and work with our customers. So the first is really to adopt enterprise-wide security policies. So you want to consider both the current and the emerging compute and DevOps environments, and then use a single solution to manage privileges across the entire enterprise. The second thing is to lock down the management console. This is likely your biggest vulnerability, and it's going to be the entry point, or the most common entry point for an attacker. And you don't need to tell me how effective phishing attacks can be. I think we all know that. So this is something that's very basic and should be relatively easy to lock down. And you want to lock it down for both human users, APIs, and scripts as well. That's the management console. Let's lock that down. The third best practice is to secure the credentials for apps, scripts, and other assets running in the cloud. Now, the key here is to really follow the best practice of eliminating any hard coding and use of shared credentials, and really rotate those credentials per policy. And you'll find this gets much more critical as your cloud apps gain access to more business data. So as those cloud apps get more significant, get more involved in the business, and get more mission critical, it becomes increasingly important to be able to lock down those credentials that the apps are using to access other resources. The fourth area, and this is really cloud specific, is really automating and securing the privileges with the elastic compute and auto scaling. Again, to take advantage of cloud, you're probably going to be doing things on demand. So the key here is to immediately secure the privileges when new app instances are created, and then remove them when they're decommissioned. And this is really important, because basically while you may start using cloud without taking advantage of elastic compute, you should plan for it, because at some point you will be doing that. The fifth area is to apply consistent security policies across the DevOps environment, and this includes DevOps tools and pipeline. And this is another area to get involved with sooner rather than wait for the gap between the security function and developers to grow. It's much better to get in there quickly and take control of it. And then the sixth area is just assume there's going to be multiple cloud environments. When you make your planning assumptions, you should assume multiple cloud environments, because inevitably that's what's going to happen. So now, just before we jump into the Q&A, and I realize that we've focused a lot on privileged account security, but there's actually more to securing the cloud than privileged account security. And we recognize that while privileged account security is critical and a critical piece of securing your cloud infrastructure, security has got multiple dimensions, and we really do view it as a team sport. So while, for that, we've basically established a series of alliance and partnerships with other security vendors to help secure your environment. Now, obviously, there's a lot of different vendors on this list, but as I mentioned, we also work very closely with our public cloud vendors, the DevOps tool providers, and others to ensure our customers are secure. And many of these include partnerships and integrations so as to really ease the deployment for our customers. So now let's jump into a few questions. Now look, if we don't get to your questions in the remaining time, we'll be happy to answer them directly one-on-one. You can email me or one of the local engineers or account executives can also work with you. Now we've got systems engineers and professional services in most major cities in the US and around the globe, as well as with local partners and support teams. And we've got white papers, technical notes, and we also run a series of technical webinars on the Frontline series and have a series of cloud initiatives coming up there. So again, thanks for hanging on here, and I'll pass it over to the Q&A section.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. Just some outstanding information. And I'm going to bring Brian in as well here because we do have some questions. Brian, the first question I've got is pretty straightforward. Is there a lens into preventing exploitation of the legitimate credentials?
So, yes. There is a lens that we can watch through PTA to be alerted on anomalies and different ways the accounts are used. PTA stands for Privileged Threat Analytics. But in addition to that, just besides alerting, we can also use our Privileged Session Manager to isolate those sessions and make sure that we control the points of entry to use those credentials if those credentials are potentially exposed or compromised.
All right. We've got a next question here. This one is from Catherine. Can you explain what you mean by the Amazon Management Console being the point of weakness? Isn't it in the laptop that the user is using?
Well, so I'll jump in. I mean, you're right. It is the laptop, but I mean, ultimately that gives you access to the management console. I mean, it's a web-based interface. So, I mean, I guess it's semantics. I don't know, Brian, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, Chris, what I'd add to that is I would say that absolutely the laptop is the point of entry for any attacker to get into an environment. But where the console from the cloud perspective becomes more of an issue is that the attacker taking over those API keys and having access to the console can now start injecting things into the AMIs and into the images you're using to where you could be pushing the software out for them on their behalf based on them having this access and being able to now control your infrastructure. And then also in addition, they can copy that infrastructure off somewhere else and start doing attacks on it offline.
All right. Got a question here. This one's from James. Actually, a really interesting question, James. Thank you. How long did it take for the CyberArk Red Team to break into the financial services organization that you talked about in the case study?
Yeah, no, so that's a good question. So typically, the Red Team takes about 2 weeks on these projects. So this was done in, I believe, quite a bit less than 2 weeks. And they have a pretty sophisticated approach to those phishing attacks, leveraging all the information you can get on a corporation from LinkedIn and so on and so forth. And then once they're phished into the organization, it can be very fast. It's scary. It's very scary. And again, one of the challenges here is because, as Brian just pointed out, you can access so many resources from that management console. Once you're in the management console, you've got the keys to the kingdom. You can do whatever you want, and that's what's scary. So you've really got to protect that.
All right. Question here from Abhishek. While accessing the AWS Management Console, will sessions be monitored?
They can. Yeah, they can be. I don't know, Brian, do you want to jump in there? But they certainly can be if you use the PSM solution.
Yes, absolutely. So this is where, with CyberArk's Privileged Session Manager, we can do a video recording of the access to the console and what they're doing, as well as do a text-based recording as well of the commands that they're running on the system so that you can review any access that was done to the management console.
And it's quite cool, isn't it, Brian? Because you can actually prioritize like red, green, yellow in terms of what should be looked at. And if there's something that's sort of suspicious that you based, or there's a particularly high level of access or big changes like scaling up a large number of compute resources, you can basically flag that, and then we can potentially get someone involved, and that can get blocked by the administrator or at least checked out. And at the same time, it's recorded the whole way through. Yeah. Good question, Aaron.
All right. Just for our audience, real quickly, as we log off here, there is a short survey that will pop up. We take very seriously that you give us time out of your busy day, and we like to do the best possible job we can with these events, so that survey will help us understand what we can do more of and better. Also, don't forget to download a copy of the slides under your Downloads button on your console, as well as the case study and a little bit about how to work with AWS. So please do take advantage of that. With that, I would like to thank our sponsor today, CyberArk, because without them, we don't get a chance to bring you this great information on a truly important topic. And huge thanks to our speaker, Chris, and our technical help from Brian Murphy. So I want to thank you guys very much. With that, this is Aaron Goldberg. Thank you for your time, and have a great week. This is Aaron Goldberg signing off.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone.